These are 7 things that vanish the moment you retire. And none of them appear on any financial checklist you've ever been handed. Most people spend decades building the money side of retirement, the savings rate, the 401k contributions, the withdrawal strategy, and then they actually stop working. And they realize the hardest part had nothing to do with money at all. Retirement, as Americans know, it was essentially invented in 1935, when the Social Security Act created the modern concept of stopping work at a certain age and entering a life of leisure. That is less than 100 years ago. Which means the psychological infrastructure for handling it has never really caught up over a lifetime. The average American logs roughly 90,000 hours at work, about 1/3 of every waking hour, structured around a job, a schedule, a role, and then one day it stops. And what fills that space turns out to be a question of identity, purpose, community, and meaning, none of which show up in the retirement planning folders most people have been building since their 30s. The U.S. Surgeon General's 2023 Advisory on Loneliness and Isolation called retirement one of the most significant life transitions, accelerating social disconnection in America. Not a lifestyle blogger, the Surgeon General. And that framing tells you something about how serious this actually gets. For people who walk in unprepared, here are the 7 things that go quiet after you retire. The first thing that disappears is your routine. And this one tends to hit faster than people expect. In 1982, psychologist Marie Jahoda published a framework identifying 5 things that employment provides beyond a paycheck. And the very first one on her list was time structure. Work tells you when to wake up, when to be somewhere, when the day starts and ends. And that external rhythm gets woven into your nervous system over 30 or 40 years of following it, without ever consciously noticing how much you depend on it. Retirement doesn't just remove the job, it pulls out the entire scaffolding the job was quietly holding in place. Sociologist Robert Ashley mapped this pattern back in 1976 with what became one of the most cited frameworks in gerontology, his phase model of retirement. What he found was that most people move through a honeymoon period in the first few months, where the freedom feels like an extended vacation, and then somewhere between 6 and 18 months in, a disenchantment phase sets in. The days start blurring together, and without any external structure pulling them forward, a lot of people arrive at a feeling they can't quite name, but that lands somewhere between restlessness and genuine loss. Research published in The Gerontologist in 2021 confirmed that the first 6 to 12 months of retirement tend to be the most psychologically turbulent period of the entire transition. And the American Psychological Association has consistently linked unstructured time in early retirement to rising rates of depression and anxiety, particularly across those first 2 years. The people who handle this best don't wait for structure to appear on its own. They build it deliberately before they need it. The second thing that goes quiet is your social world, and this one does more damage, quietly, than almost anything else on this list. A significant portion of adult friendships are what researchers describe as contextual relationships, connections that exist because 2 people share a physical space and a common purpose, not because they would have found each other otherwise. The office, the team, the department, the weekly meetings, those environments generate real bonds, but the bonds live inside the context. And when the context ends, so does the easy maintenance of the relationship. Not out of anyone's fault, just out of the structural reality that the thing holding it together is gone. A 2019 Cigna survey found that 61% of Americans already reported feeling lonely before retirement even enters the picture, which means many people arrive at this transition already running a social deficit. What the 2023 Surgeon General's advisory added was a piece of data that reframes the whole conversation. Social isolation carries health risks equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That is a direct line from the advisory itself, and it makes loneliness feel less like an emotional problem and more like a clinical one. ARP's Public Policy Institute calculated the financial footprint of this, finding that social isolation among adults 50 and older costs Medicare an estimated $6.7 billion per year in additional healthcare spending. Meanwhile, the Harvard study of adult development, running for over 85 years, making it arguably the longest study of human well-being ever conducted, reached a conclusion that Dr. Robert Waldinger, the study's current director, has stated plainly in public: the quality of your relationships predicts your health and happiness in later life more powerfully than wealth, status, or genetics. His 2015 TED Talk on those findings has been watched over 40 million times, because the conclusion lands differently when you understand the decades of data sitting behind it. Number 3 is the quietest one on the list, and for many people, the heaviest. For most working adults, the career isn't just a thing they do. It is a core part of how they understand themselves, how they walk into a room, how they answer the question of who they are. Psychologists call this role identity, the part of self-concept tied to the social roles a person occupies. And research published in the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology found that people whose identity runs closely fused with their career role show significantly higher rates of depression and anxiety after retiring. The job ends, and a version of themselves goes with it. A 2014 survey conducted by Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, in partnership with the research firm AgeWave, reached more than 7,000 people on exactly this topic. And what came back was striking. 72% of pre-retirees expected retirement to feel like freedom, but a meaningful share of actual retirees described the loss of professional standing not as liberation, but as something closer to grief. The same study found that 82% of people who returned to some form of work in retirement said their motivation was primarily financial. What drew them back was the mental engagement, the sense of purpose, and the social connection that the workplace had been quietly supplying all along. Erik Erikson, one of the most influential developmental psychologists of the 20th century, framed the central challenge of later adulthood as what he called generativity versus stagnation, which essentially comes down to a single question: am I still contributing something that matters to anyone? Retirement, without preparation, can trigger a genuine stagnation crisis in people who spent decades with that question, answered automatically by showing up to work. Number 4 is something people rarely see coming, and that is the quieting of consistent cognitive challenge. Work, even frustrating, exhausting, sometimes boring work, demands things from your brain every single day. Problem solving, decision-making, managing relationships, learning new systems, handling conflict and ambiguity. All of that keeps neural pathways active in ways that don't register consciously until the demand stops. Dr. Yakov Stern of Columbia University developed what is known as the cognitive reserve hypothesis, which holds that sustained intellectual engagement builds the brain's resilience against aging and decline over time. A career running across decades has been contributing to that reserve passively, and most people have no idea how much until it is no longer happening. A 2013 study published in the Journal of Economic Perspectives, drawing on data from the U.S. Health and Retirement Study, found a statistically significant negative association between retirement and cognitive function, with memory showing the clearest decline. A 2021 study out of Binghamton University added an important distinction: abrupt retirement, specifically the kind that happens without planned cognitive substitution, without deliberately replacing the mental demands that work was providing, carried the strongest association with accelerated cognitive decline. None of this means retirement automatically damages the brain. What it means is that cognitive stimulation doesn't maintain itself once the job is gone, and most people never plan a replacement for it. Number 5 runs deeper than identity. This one is about meaning, and specifically about the feeling that what you do actually matters to someone other than yourself. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps and published Man's Search for Meaning in 1946, built his entire framework around a single argument. The primary motivational force driving human beings is not pleasure or achievement, but the search for meaning. For most working people, that meaning sits embedded quietly in the career, in serving a customer, in teaching a student, in building something, in keeping a team moving. It operates in the background, sustaining and orienting, even during the days when the work feels entirely routine. Retirement removes it, and the silence that follows can be disorienting, in ways that are genuinely hard to articulate. Research published in Psychological Science in 2014 by Dr. Patrick Hill and colleagues found that a strong sense of life purpose correlated with reduced mortality risk and a lower likelihood of developing cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's disease, and stroke, meaning purpose isn't just emotionally satisfying. It registers as physiologically protective. A 2016 study in the Journal of Gerontology found that retirees who replaced work-based contribution with volunteer activity showed significantly better psychological well-being outcomes than those who didn't, pointing to a clear behavioral path forward for people willing to take it. Ken Dixtwald, founder of AgeWave and one of the country's leading voices on aging, has argued for years that the retirement model inherited from the mid-20th century, total leisure as the reward for a working life, is fundamentally mismatched with modern human psychology, especially now that the average person who reaches 65 can expect nearly 20 more years of life, according to CDC National Vital Statistics data. 20 years is not a vacation. That is a second life, and a second life requires purpose to hold it together. Number 6 is the financial one on this list, but not in the way most retirement content approaches it. The entire architecture of retirement planning is built around accumulation. Save enough, invest well, reach the number. But the moment the job ends, a switch has to flip from saving to spending, and for a surprising number of people, that switch never fully flips. Behavioral economists call this the asset decumulation paradox and Nobel Prize Winning economist Richard Thaler and his colleagues documented the underlying mechanism thoroughly. Loss aversion, the well-established finding that humans feel losses roughly twice as intensely as equivalent gains, watching a portfolio draw down, even in a planned, rational withdrawal that the math fully supports, generates genuine psychological pain that overrides the logic. A 2023 report from the Employee Benefit Research Institute found that a substantial share of retirees spend at levels well below what their assets could comfortably support, holding portfolios near pre-retirement levels for a decade or more into retirement. Driven not by financial necessity, but by fear, people sit on money they earned over a lifetime and find themselves unable to spend it because spending feels indistinguishable from losing. The fear isn't entirely detached from reality, which is what makes this so hard to untangle. Fidelity Investments estimates that a 65-year-old couple retiring in 2023 needs approximately $315,000 just to cover healthcare costs, a number Fidelity updates every year. The Social Security Administration reports that Social Security represents 90% of income for roughly 1 in 4 Americans aged 65 and older. And Federal Reserve data from 2022 found that only about 33% of Americans hold any retirement plan beyond Social Security. Those numbers explain where the fear comes from. But for many retirees, the anxiety runs well beyond what their actual financial picture warrants, and it quietly robs them of the retirement their whole working life was pointed toward building. Number 7 takes the longest to name, and that is probably why it catches people so off guard. Work provides a story you're living inside, a trajectory with a clear next chapter, promotions to pursue, projects with deadlines, quarterly targets, career milestones stacked ahead of you on a path, going somewhere forward. That forward orientation does enormous amounts of psychological work on a person's behalf, and it operates almost entirely below the level of conscious awareness. Retirement removes the path, and what a lot of people discover is that without a forward narrative pulling them ahead, the days lose a quality they can't quite put a name to. Martin Seligman, who built the field of positive psychology, organized human flourishing around 5 pillars in his PERMA model: positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. Retirement has the capacity to disrupt all 5 at once. And the one most often underestimated is achievement. The quiet, steady satisfaction of moving forward, of making progress, of having something to show for how you spent your time. A 2020 Gallup Street UD found that clear goals and a sense of forward momentum rank among the strongest predictors of daily well-being across all age groups. And the absence of that structure in retirement correlates directly with well-being decline. Psychologist Laura Carstensen at Stanford Center on Longevity has spent decades studying how people relate to time as they age, and her socio-emotional selectivity theory shows that as people perceive their future time horizon shortening, their priorities shift in ways that can be adaptive and deeply meaningful, or paralyzing, depending on whether they've built a new forward narrative before the old one ended. Gerontologist Nancy Schlossberg described this liminal space in her 2009 book, Revitalizing Retirement, published by the American Psychological Association, as psychological retirement, the internal identity shift that sometimes arrives months or years before or after the formal date, leaving people suspended between what they were and what they haven't yet decided to become. A 2023 study by AgeWave, in collaboration with Edward Jones, found that retirees who proactively plan the non-financial dimensions of retirement, social structure, sense of purpose, personal growth goals, reported significantly higher life satisfaction than those who planned only the money. The gap between those two groups is large, and it is built from exactly the 7 things on this list. Here is the honest version of what this video has been building toward. Retirement is one of the most significant psychological transitions a person moves through, and the financial industry has spent nearly 90 years preparing people for the money side, while leaving everything else largely unaddressed. Those 90,000 hours of working life weren't only generating income. They were generating structure, identity, community, cognitive engagement, purpose, and a forward narrative. None of those things transfer automatically when the job ends. Every one of them has to be rebuilt deliberately, and ideally before you need them, not after the silence has already set in. The average person who retires at 62 or 63 carries nearly 2 decades of life ahead of them, according to CDC data. That is not a footnote at the end of a career. That is a second act, and it deserves the same quality of planning that went into the 401k. The people who handle retirement well aren't always the ones with the most money. They're the ones who answered before they stopped working. The question that most people never think to ask: when work goes quiet, what fills the space? If this video made you think about something you hadn't considered before, that is exactly why we made it. Subscribe for more content covering the financial and psychological side of building a life that actually holds up. And if you're within 10 years of retirement, the next video is linked right above.